a Dear Media original podcast.
It is my extreme pleasure and honor to introduce today's guest. It's someone that I really admire and get a lot of wisdom from daily. It's TikTok's favorite therapist, Therapy Motherfucking Jeff. Thank you so much for being here.
Yes, thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk to you.
I'm really excited to talk to you. This week, we talked a lot about relationships, and something that comes up a lot in my work, and I just think that comes up in wellness all the time, is this relationship that we have with ourselves. And in my work, it comes up in relating to the relationship we have with food, but it really affects everything. And I was wondering how you felt, what having a healthy relationship with yourself means to you.
I mean, it's the most important relationship, right? The relationship that you have with yourself. And it also feels like it's the relationship that we forget about the most.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times we're so focused on everything that's happening outside of ourselves, whether it's our family, friends, or relationships. All those things can really kind of hijack our experience and take us away from our relationship with ourselves. So it seems like one of the first things that we need to do is try to be as present as we possibly can with the relationship with ourselves. And there's different things that we can do that a lot of us forget to do. One of them, whenever I talk to people about trying to cultivate or accept the relationship that you have with yourself, is accepting your flaws and imperfections. And if you can, try to see your flaws and imperfections as endearing or cute or sweet. I can be incredibly absent-minded, and that can be really frustrating to people, but I think it's so fucking adorable. I'm constantly losing things, and it's so cute. And you go on a little treasure hunt with me, trying to find my keys. I also want to kind of attract people into my life that I can see these things as endearing, my flaws and imperfections, and they can see these things as endearing. I think that if I'm around a lot of people that are really critical or judgmental or can't tolerate some of my flaws and imperfections, then I can really get in my head about it. So first step, I think, is accepting your flaws and imperfections and trying not to be really hard on yourself, practicing self-compassion, basically. Knowing that you're a whole human being. So trying to kind of keep in mind that you would probably be really compassionate with your friends or your loved ones or the people that you're in relationship with, and you can just do that for yourself. Why aren't you doing that for yourself? And it's just, I don't know. I was going to say it's just as easy to do that for yourself as it is for anybody else, but for some reason it kind of isn't.
It isn't.
Maybe, yeah. Why do you think it's hard for us to practice compassion for ourselves?
I think that it's that we worry that if we're too kind to ourselves, we won't get anywhere. We won't achieve anything, and we'll kind of be fuck ups. And I think that we worry if we're too self-compassionate, we'll just kind of be status quo, when in reality, and you can speak to this, it's quite the opposite, because that acceptance piece is what helps us kind of get out of our own way and propel us forward.
Exactly. I think there's so many messages that we receive from the world or society or culture, capitalism, which is sort of work hard, you got to work hard, you got to try, you got to it's going to take, you're going to be in pain, it's going to be really hard. And there's sort of that, that's the way that we think we need to motivate ourselves, when that doesn't work. Or maybe that works up to a point until you feel horrible about yourself.
Yeah.
The thing that motivates us to do our best work is self-love and self-compassion, and really just and it's also what you were saying before, I think kind of resonates as well. Whenever I see clients, inevitably what always happens is they come in, they have a presenting problem, they're not working through that problem as fast as they want to be working, they keep on making mistakes, they talk about the same fucking thing every single week, and I am fine with it. I am here on this journey. It's going to take as long as it needs to take. It's okay. I love that you're trying and that you're doing your best, and I accept you. But they don't accept themselves, so they start thinking that I'm going to judge them, that their therapist is getting so tired of them, that I must be so exhausted hearing the same thing over and over and over. But really, I'm not. They're the ones that maybe feel exhausted about it. I love them, and I need them to love themselves in order to move through this. And I want them to kind of, one of the things that I try to get people to really integrate in therapy is this sort of, you did the best you could with the information and the awareness you had. So you're always just doing the best you can. Maybe that's not true, but like typically you're doing the best you can with like the information and the awareness you have. That's a really like lovely, beautiful thing or way to kind of think of yourself and to accept yourself and to create like a better relationship with yourself is to be really gentle and compassionate. And that goes into like forgiving yourself. You need to forgive yourself for the things that you did or said, that maybe you did some bad things or maybe you made some mistakes, but maybe you did them because you were scared or you were triggered or you were feeling like you were having a trauma response. You're not always going to be able to react perfectly. And I think that a lot of people like punish themselves and think that like they should have done better. I should have tried harder. What is wrong with me? Again, there's the self-compassion piece. Your original question of like having a good relationship with yourself, it's incredibly important. There's lots of, it's also like a relationship that you're going to be working on for the rest of your life. So you have to be kind of patient with yourself.
There's something that you said that was so important because it is the self-compassion piece, but with that also is the self-knowledge piece of like, okay, so like what did I learn about myself in that moment? Like I learned that like there are things that happen that like tend to trip me up, and there are some things that we can avoid, but there are some things that are just like super unavoidable.
Mm-hmm.
And that I feel like comes up a lot in my work too,
Mm-hmm.
just people like being like, well, I just don't want to have any roadblocks ever, and it's just like never going to be the reality. So like learning to live with them,
Mm-hmm.
I think
Mm-hmm.
that's so important.
Learning to live with them, like you're saying, trying to figure out if there's a lesson to be learned. A lot of times, if there is a lesson and a growth edge or something, then that can feel really good. You can focus on that and be like, oh, this is the lesson. This is how I can grow. Also, it's going to like be uncomfortable or it might be a little painful to grow, and that's okay.
I'm so glad you said that because you posted something this morning that I loved. You said,
Mm-hmm.
in order to feel better in the future, you might have to do something that makes you feel worse in the present. And I was
Mm-hmm.
hoping that you could go into that a little bit.
I think I was, I mean, that can apply to lots of things that we
Right.
do in our lives, but I was specifically like while I was writing that script, I was thinking of relationships,
Yeah.
of being in a relationship that isn't really serving you, but you're staying in it because it's familiar or it's comfortable and you don't want to break up with it, or you don't want to like speak up to get your needs
Yeah.
met, or you don't want to like change the boundaries of that relationship because you're too scared to do it and it's going to be really uncomfortable. It could be really painful to speak your truth. It can be really scary. You're taking a risk and the relationship might end or it might change dramatically, and that can be devastating. However, I want your 6 month self, your future self, or 1 year future self to be able to look back on your present day self and be so proud of you for making that decision. Uh, and we so I get stuck in it all the time of just like making decisions that will make me feel good today, and I'm not thinking about my future self enough. So that video is for like all the people that are watching my posts, but it's also for me. All my videos are for me, basically, just me talking to myself, because this is something that I forget a lot of the time.
Well, the future self piece is really important for so many things. And we talk a lot about it here too, which is that like we all have like right now wants and things that we want immediately, rewards we can reap immediately. And then we all
Hmm.
want, to reap rewards that we would get like 6 months a year, 3 months a year from now. And it's not about like always, at least in my work, it's not always about choosing the behavior that benefits the long term goal. Like sometimes we're going to,
Right.
want the immediate
Hmm.
want. But I think like being thoughtful, like being honest with yourself in that moment about like at least keeping that present self in mind. There's actually really cool research on like if you look at digitized older versions of yourself, it actually helps you be more connected to your future self
Mm.
because there was research that showed that people viewed their future selves as complete strangers.
Mm.
And then it made it
Wow.
really hard. Yeah, it was so cool. And it made it really hard for people to do favors for themselves in the future, essentially, because they just had no connection to their future self. So,
Hmm. It was something that I had to keep in mind when I was like quitting smoking. Is
ah,
that I loved smoking. It was one of my favorite things to do. I looked so sexy when I smoked. And it's also like a very social thing to do. Like it was a grounding thing to do because I was taking like deep breaths. Like I was
Oh,
yoga breathing the whole time I was doing it. I mean, I was yoga breathing in like toxins, but
yeah.
still, there were deep breaths
Yeah,
that I was taking.
carcinogens, but still.
Still, um, but I had to stop smoking and experience the pain of withdrawals and having
Mm,
those nicotine fits in order for myself to be really proud, my future self to be really proud of the decision that I made. And that was one of the hardest like addictions to quit. And that's something I think about when I want to try to just tolerate the uncomfortable feelings.
that's exactly that. It is uncomfortable in that moment. You know it's the right thing, but it still in
Hmm.
that moment feels terrible. I was wondering, and I feel this way as a practitioner, so I was just wondering how you might feel. But I feel like anytime you're like of service in that way and you're kind of holding space for people, it's obviously incredibly rewarding, but it is like you can take on emotional energy of like hearing kind of dark things, hearing heavy things. And I was wondering how you ground yourself in those moments and how you kind of take care of yourself so it doesn't affect you.
Well, I usually do that work in like my home office or in my actual office where I'm talking to clients and processing their stuff. And whenever I leave that space, I leave all the stuff in there.
Oh, that's
So
so
it's sort
good.
of it's like a very deliberate, intentional thought and moment that I have where I just like take a breath, I leave it
Mm,
in the office, and I can come back to it the next day if I need to. I've been doing this for like 20 years now, so
yeah.
it's also something that just happens automatically. I've been lucky enough to, I've never really been that person that like where these things stick with me and haunt me. I've always been able to create those boundaries pretty naturally, but there are sessions every now and then where they can really kind of like get into my soul, or where I'll cry with a client or something will be incredibly impactful. And when that
Mm.
happens, I just sort of need to honor it, understand it, feel it, and then deliberately release it back to them or the universe or wherever it needs to go.
I love that.
Hmm.
I think that that is so amazing that you can kind of like compartmentalize in that way, and it's so healthy, and obviously just speaks to you being in the right profession. And
It's healthy and it's also not healthy sometimes. Sometimes I
oh,
compartmentalize too much
interesting.
in my life. So I'm
Ah,
very good at like creating those boundaries and limits, and that serves me in my work. It might not serve me all the time in my personal life, though.
interesting. That is really interesting. And I feel like people really like to speculate about your personal, like I know just from being like a longtime follower that
Uh-huh.
a lot of people have a lot of thoughts. And, one of the things I wanted to ask you is that I feel like more recently you've gotten more, like you're obviously a professional therapist and you're so knowledgeable, but I feel like you've played around a little more recently with being kind of silly and being super yourself. And I mean, you've always been that way, but even more
Hmm.
so. And I was wondering
Hmm.
how that feels for you, because like I'm sure there is a want when like you're now so public that like there's a want to be seen for like being a three-dimensional person, not just like therapy Jeff. And I was wondering how you
Yeah.
felt.
Uh, it's been a journey when it comes to like how authentic I'm going to be. So there's the therapy just side where I'm just being kind of clinical, giving relationship advice. That's really easy for me to step into. It also feels like just appropriate as a therapist
Yeah.
online. I'm going to like give therapy advice, whatever. Um, there's also like this funny side of me or like more humorous side of me that I want to be able to step into, but I know can be just a little jarring for folks because they're just like, no, I'm just here for the relationship advice. And now you're trying to be funny. And are you being sarcastic? That doesn't feel super professional. So I have to be really deliberate. And whenever I make something that's a little funny or lighthearted, people love it and other people do not like it. Like
Really?
yeah, they either don't get the joke or they think that I'm being really inappropriate. And I could be a lot more inappropriate. I feel like I'm being like pretty
I think so
vanilla a lot of
too.
times. Yeah, just sort of pushing the boundary just a little bit. But I know that it's not going like my sense of humor isn't going to work for every single person, and I'm going to like lose followers possibly. I also, there's been like a handful of times, and I want to do more of this, but I keep on holding back. But there's been a handful of times where I talk about my family.
Yeah, it's powerful for me when you do that.
Yeah, and I want to do that more, but I have like very fractured relationships with most of the people in
Yeah.
my family, and I know that they're watching.
Oh,
And I know that they don't like whenever I talk about them
yeah.
because it's sort of my point of view and my narrative, my experience on the family. And
Yeah.
we all have very different narratives of what happened. And there was a lot of trauma and there was a lot of disagreements and tons of arguments and fights.
Mm.
But now I'm the one person in the family that has a public platform. So if I talk about my experience, all of a sudden they don't have control over it.
Yeah.
People are going to think certain things about them, even though I keep them anonymous and you
Of
can't find
course.
out who they are. It can be really impactful for me to talk about my family life and my struggles with it. But I also know that my family members are watching and are having a really hard time. So I don't know what to do about that all the time.
That is really hard. I mean, you're so knowledgeable and all the information, like all the clinical information, everything is so amazing. But I mean, it is the delivery and it is how authentic you are and it is the whole thing. And I think when you do get to be as huge on social media as you are, like there are not everyone's gonna love like
Hmm.
it was interesting to hear you say that some people didn't love when you were like did the funny stuff and whatever, and I'm like, oh my god, then they can leave. Like we'll find more
They
people.
can.
But the stuff
Yeah.
with your family, I can completely understand that must be a really difficult line to walk.
Yeah, it is. It's difficult. And they asked me to not talk about my family. They're just like,
Uh,
we don't want like I don't want to hear about your experience. I don't want you to ever mention that you have like a mom or sister or dad that's like this or that you've experienced them that way. And what that felt like was they were telling me to not speak my truth.
right.
And eventually I was like, "Mm, I'm going to. I'm going to every now and then, and I'm not going to stay silent about it because, like you said, those posts, whenever I make them, they really connect with people. So I think it's important.
Yeah, I think so too. And it
Hmm.
sounds like you're doing it thoughtfully and it's not like an easy situation, but you're considering all the things.
I'm doing it thoughtfully, but they don't think I'm doing it thoughtfully. So so it's this kind of thing that where you have to, and this goes back maybe to like having a good relationship with yourself. There's people that are going to be close to you, maybe family members that you've grown up with that are going to think negative things about you and are not going to like some of the things that you're doing, or they're going to disagree with you. And I can allow that to affect me and see myself through their eyes and feel a lot of shame and feel a lot of guilt and feel like I'm not good enough and feel like I'm being really hurtful or whatever they think I'm doing. Or I can really celebrate myself and speak my truth and surround myself with people that also think that I'm talking about really good stuff or important things or I'm doing good work out there, you know? So it's this battle of these voices in my family, not allowing those to take over or hijack or flood me, and try to stay centered in who I am, who I know I really am.
I love that. And I think it kind of goes back to the thing that I always try and hold on to, which is like if you're operating from that really thoughtful space, there are going to be times that we're going to disappoint people that we care
Hmm.
about or people just in general, and like being okay with disappointing people even though that's really uncomfortable, as long as like we're being incredibly true and healthy for ourselves.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly. I think I agree with you 100%, and yet I struggle with
I know,
that
me
every
too.
day,
Oh, of
you
course, me
know?
too. Of
Yeah.
course. It's hard to disappoint. Like, it doesn't feel good. We don't want to disappoint people. I know music is a big part of your life, and I imagine it's pretty grounding for you. And I was wondering, because it is so important to you, what are three songs you think everyone should listen to at least once?
Well, I'm not going to give good answers for anybody except for myself.
But that's what we
I'm,
want, see?
yeah. Okay, good point. Songs that feel inspiring to me. So one of my favorite bands is Not a Surf.
Okay.
They had that one hit in the 90s called Popular.
Yes.
It was like a fun video that they showed on MTV. Anyways, Not a Surf is still making a lot of music, and one of the songs that I love is called Inside of Love, where the song is about being very sad that they're not inside of love, they're not in relationship, and they're so
Ah,
depressed about it. But at the end of the song, they're just kind of like, you know what, I'm having a bad night. And so it's like this very like emotional, deep song about not being in love, and then at the end being like, "It's I'm gonna be fine. I'm gonna be okay." And
Oh,
we all have bad nights, sort of thing. So that's the song that I go to if I'm feeling like I'm depressed about not being in a relationship or a relationship has ended or something. Um, One that like maybe is not going to do anything for anybody, but I actually posted about it this morning, was my number one all-time favorite song in the 90s, which is a classic. I think we can all agree on it. Basket Case by Green Day.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And one of the reasons I like that, and I think that I just realized this not too long ago, is that it's about like neuroses and going to therapy, and that we're all just little basket
We
cases.
are.
So it also feels like very validating.
I love that.
It's a very like fun poppy song to sing along to. The thing is that like this is a little cringe, and maybe I can't think of like a specific song, but the band that I go to all the time, if I'm feeling angry and I need to get like this anger out of my system, and I just want to like sing at the top of my lungs, is Sum 41. Do you listen to Sum
Yeah, I
41?
know. Yeah, like, I mean, I grew up same era. I'm
Right.
into it. I'm here for it.
So
Absolutely.
any like Sum 41 song where they're all angry, and it's like
I
such
love
it's like
that.
fun anger. It's like not
Yes.
even like what do you have to be angry about? I don't know. But it can be like very releasing whenever I sing a Sum 41 song.
I love that so much. And I love
Hmm.
your love of music. Like, it's
Hmm.
fun to see you talk about it because, like, your whole face lights up and you're always just, like, so excited to be like, this is what I love. And no one else needs to love it, also.
Exactly.
That's the whole
Yeah.
thing. I'm so honored that you came on. Thank you
Hmm.
so much.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here, and hopefully I can come on again in the future.
I would love that.
Let's do it.
Thank you so much.